Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to go over replacing the grill cloth on a Marshall cabinet. We're going to go over a couple other maintenance items as well, like doesn't want to roll too well. So we're going to fix that. We're going to rewire it as well while we're in there, and I'm just going to go through all the steps on how to get it done. Alright, so we've got this thing flipped upside down, taking a look at the wheels here. Interesting enough, these wheels are not original to this cabinet. This cabinet was probably made in the 2000s. That would have come with the plastic bases and the coarse thread wheels. This one actually has metal bases with fine thread Revo wheels, which were found on much older Marshall cabinets. The basic principle is the same. I think what we're going to do to get it to roll a little bit better is just pack the bearings full of grease. I think that should take care of it. So I greased all these wheels and it didn't work out so well. They spun a little bit better, but when you put a lot of weight on it, they still didn't want to shift when you would change direction. I don't have any extra Marshall wheels. What I did here was I took a 2.5-inch hole saw, cut it through a pallet, which I think this is probably about, let's see, almost 5/8, maybe just a little over a 1/2 inch. Took a 5/8 pilot bit. Now that fits this socket perfectly. I did this for no other reason than I wanted to match the height of the stock wheels. This is a little shorter, therefore if I have this cab sitting beside a cab with Marshall wheels, the height's going to be the same. Alright, I got my helper here putting together some screws for me. So I'm just using 1.5" number 8 wood screws and number 6 finish washers. Bam, that's it. Doesn't have to be crazy tight. That should... Alright, well the wheels worked out pretty good. Now we're going to get this back panel off. Check it out, we got a quad of greenbacks in this one. I am going to pop these out though, and I'm going to put in some different speakers here. These are going to go live in another cabinet, and I'm not worried about this wiring at all because we are going to redo it. Alright, when you have the speakers out, you want to take this thing out too because it's going to get in your way and you're going to end up breaking it. Now the next part about getting this front baffle out is you got to take screws out all the way around the edges, but the baffle's not going to fold back unless you get the handles out. Now newer Marshall cabinets they're all screws. The older ones are rivets. A little bit more of a pain in the ass because you're going to have to drill the rivets out, and if you don't have a rivet gun, you're going to have to go get one and use maybe a slightly larger size to redo it. But if you don't want to use rivets, you can also use T-nuts. One thing I don't like about these is over time you'll notice all these corners and stuff will break off. I'm always truly amazed that this piece of plastic can lift these guys up like the way they do. There's a little trick I got to fix that as well. You can get metal handles that will fit. You can get metal handles that are slightly bigger, which if you take an oscillating tool, you can just cut this out, or a jigsaw or whatever. You can cut the hole a little bit larger to match. I don't really feel like spending the money to fix every single cabinet that I own because there's probably like 20 of them. I just reuse these as long as I can until they disintegrate to nothing. We'll just drill some extra holes in these guys and just use more screws and more finish washers, really. And that seems to work out pretty well. Added a little bit of life left to them. When those crack, then it's time to go. Now that you've got the handles off, we can take this front baffle completely out. Alright, now you can actually do this with all the speakers on. But, you know, obviously you get the speakers out. It does make things, does make life a lot easier. Alright, had to get a razor knife. This, there's a little bit of, I guess, excess Tolex here that's just making this part troublesome. It's just not glued all the way down. If we just cut it out, cut the piece that's coming up, that problem will go away. There you go. You've got a nice Marshall baffle in front of you. Next thing we're going to want to do is get this emblem off here. The best way to do that is use a heat gun. Now you don't need much, just enough to kind of loosen that glue up that's holding it on there, because there's 2 screws behind here we're going to want to take off. Now if you don't care, you could rip that thing off with a, you know, a cat's paw or a nail puller or something, but I don't want to do that. There we go. So I just put a little bit more heat on. I can just slide my, I got a real tiny screwdriver. If you're careful, you can use a blade, but that's it. Next up, we got to get the Marshall logo off of here. Now, it's a Marshall. You got to be really, really careful. I don't want to ever mess these things up. They're not cheap, and I like the Marshall logo on a Marshall cabinet. So the best way to get these guys off is, these are like an injection molded plastic or something like that, but they're held on. There's like little, I don't know what you call them, pins or whatever coming out of the back. It's just part of the form. So if you slide something like a putty knife, I got a little nail puller I'm using that's pretty flat. You just slide it up underneath there to find those pins and just gently work it out, because if you force it, it's gonna break. Like I said, the first couple ones I did them a lot slower than this. Yeah, once you find the pin, just kind of work it out. There we go. We got our Marshall logo out in one piece. Next up, we got to get the old grill cloth off. There's a couple different ways you can do it. If you want to salvage this piece, you can. I've never tried to put an old one back on a cabinet, but it's completely possible. There are a lot of weirdos that will go to a lot of trouble to save it. You pretty much can just kind of grab these corners here and these staples and pull them out. If you're going to salvage this, you're going to have to go through and pull every staple out by hand. We're not going to do that at all. We're going to do this the quick and dirty way. We're just going to rip it up. Throw that shit away. I'm not going to go to the trouble of pulling all the staples out. That's a waste of time, in my opinion. How many times are you going to recover it? Maybe once, maybe twice. I just pound them all back in. Now we're on to the cloth part. For this project, we are going to go with the basket weave cloth. I just like the old vintage look. It's pretty cool, if you ask me. I wouldn't put a non-Marshall cloth on a Marshall cabinet. Like, I've got another cabinet over here I'm going to recondition as well, because some numbnuts put some ugly looking silver cloth and silver piping all around it. It looks gross. I don't like it. But whatever, do what you want. If you got a table, it's going to make things a lot easier. My table is completely full of other bullshit at the moment. Just make sure you're square. You can do it by hand, but it sucks. Cool. Alright, once you have your ends, you can go ahead and slice off this excess. If you're not careful, you can end up making it a little wonky. Alright, there you go. Now you got a wrapped baffle. Alright, next is another tricky part, because we're going to have to find the holes that are meant to mount this guy. Make sure your orientation is right by looking at the bottom. You can kind of feel where that square is going to be, and then you know kind of where this thing is going to sit just about. Now, I use like a little, almost like a dental tool or something to kind of pick around. You can find one or two of the holes, and that's really all you need to get started. So I found one here, and I found another one here. Make sure the weave and the cloth is kind of out of the way so these things can sit right. So I've got my first two. The other one should fall pretty close to where they're supposed to be. Alright, now sometimes they go in easy, sometimes they go in tough. Sometimes you just push them in with your hand. Give it a smack. Look, same thing for this corner. You're going to want to put this thing on now, not later. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and get our baffle back in our cabinet. The very, very top of my socket, caster socket, it's just barely sticking up in here. I mean, like I said, I didn't drill into this, but maybe an eighth, maybe a quarter of an inch, if that. Same on this side. They're so close to the edge, they don't stick all the way through. Now that's if you make that wooden plate to extend them down, which you don't have to do. You can just drill through this stuff. I prefer not to, and like I said, I just did those as a way to make my heights match. Let's go put some speakers in this thing. I've got some G12 T75s here. some vintage 30s as well. I like the two together. I like the two separately. There's things that I like and dislike about both speakers. I think they work really well together in a cabinet. Both of them are made in England. I have some, I think, ones that were made in China as well after Celestion moved a lot of their production over there. I don't think there's a huge audible difference. I've never really A-B'd a bunch of them. Maybe we will someday. These were made in 2000. These vintage 30s were made in 2002. And if you want to figure out how to date the speakers, I will show you the code here. It's these numbers right there. 17BK. If you look up on the Celestion site, it'll tell you what those codes mean, but it's basically day, month, and year. So this would have been, I guess, 17th of February in 2000. That's how you date it with the speaker code on the frame. Some of them will have stickers on the magnet, and it's the same thing. Down right there, I don't know if it's going to focus in on that, but that is a 07ML, which is the 7th of December 2002. Your cabinet might also have a sticker down in it. The serial number, the first four, will be the year. So this cabinet is actually from 2007. Another little tidbit of information is sometimes your speaker itself will have a barcode on it and a number. This one here that says 2000, that is a Marshall barcode. That is not a Celestion barcode. That will tell you the age of the cabinet that it's in. To date the speaker correctly, you will need to read the code on the frame. Same deal on this speaker. You can tell here that it's got its own Marshall barcode, and this one's actually a Marshall label. Now if you see a vintage 30 that's Marshall, vintage by Celestion, whatever, those are all vintage 30s. I don't know if they still label them today, but I know some of the ones in the 90s and 2000s would have come with Marshall labeled speakers, but they are the exact same thing as a vintage 30. Now it's important when you screw these things in, you don't need to be crazy tight. They have lock washers on them. Let them do their job. If you over tighten them, you're going to bend the frame. Wiring speaker cabinets, I pretty much use the exact same thing every time. I use 16 gauge stranded copper wire. Now you're also going to want to know what style of wiring you're going to use before you get into this. It's probably a good idea to Google 4x12 speaker wiring if you've never done it before. Another thing to mention is the jack plate. These are fine, but I have seen them wreak a lot of havoc on amplifiers. These switches can go bad. The contacts in them can fail. You know, the jacks can fail if they get dirty as well. If one of these things goes bad, you're going to get the wrong reflected impedance back to your output transformer. You could start popping fuses and not know why. Now you notice I have these turned so I can use a very short amount of wire between these two. I'm going to want to be able to open the cabinet at least a little bit. If I want to pull the back off, I don't want to pull it off and it tug on these speaker connections. So I'm going to leave myself a little bit of room there. Now once you've cut your wire to length, you can actually put it in a drill and twist it. Cool. Now you don't want to over twist it because you're going to stress the wire. Now you don't have to twist the wire. It helps for stability. Plus for me it's about looks. Make sure you have enough slack to get from your negative terminal on one speaker to the positive terminal on the other one. There you go. I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to wire a 4x12. It's not the only way. Now that being said, this leaves you with 4 wires to attach to your jack. Parallel series will only give you 2 wires as your input. Son of a fucking bitch. Now, if you want to double check your work, you can check the polarity with a battery here. You can touch it right to the jack, or you can plug a cable in and do it. What I'm looking at is I want to know that all the speakers, when I do the positive on the positive wire, I want them all to go out. They're all going in the same direction. If you reverse it, they're all going to go in. They're all going to pull in. Cool, huh? Now, if you want to test impedance, set your multimeter to the lowest ohm setting. This one in particular goes all the way down to 200. Stick it in your positive, negative terminals. Yikes. How about we do one that doesn't make fucking noise? So right now I've got about 12.8. It's going to say anything from 12 to 14.3, 14.6, whatever. A 16 ohm cabinet's never going to read 16. It's going to see 16 once AC signal is applied to it. It's too late to get into all that. So if you're paranoid like me and you want to do something about these handles, but you're also like me and you're going to be too cheap to buy new ones, I'll just take a drill and just make some new holes here close to the corners, not so close that it'll crack. And these will actually grip better if you put a pilot hole. Getting the badge back in place. You might even have enough residue left over to just stick it on there like it is. If not, dab a little bit of super glue on there. Hot glue works too. You don't want it, well, you want it to stay on there, but you might want to get it off one day. That's it. So the first cut I did on this video was over an hour long. So what started out as a how-to repair video became a long-winded blog. So the next project I'll do, I'll break down each of the tasks into their own videos so we can get more in depth on the individual repairs. That way you can see how I repair stuff for customers as well as road-proof my own gear for tour. So thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.